The Great Controversy Between Christ and Satan. This book here is written by Ellen White, and it's a book which is doubtless familiar to the majority of you, I'm sure. There's just something interesting that I'd like to show you all in this book. And first of all, this here, it says, entered according to the Act of Congress in the year 1907 by Mrs. E.G. White. So this is the 1907 edition of the Great Controversy, or at least that's when this particular one was published. What we're going to do is go back to the appendix, or the general notes, and there's something that I want to read which is quite interesting. So it's page 685, and I'm not sure who wrote the general notes here, but whether it was Ellen White or someone else, it is very interesting to me that Ellen White had this published in her book. Okay, so this is note 9, which is a comment on something from page 447. So it says here, the bishops of Rome began very early to demand obedience from all the churches. Of this, the dispute between the Eastern and Western churches respecting Easter is a striking illustration. Okay, so what we are being told is that the bishops of Rome started to demand obedience, and what they're using to illustrate that is, of course, the controversy or the dispute between the Eastern and Western churches regarding Easter. But now we're going to look and see what it actually says. So, flipping the page, this is page 686, and what it says here, it says, this dispute arose in the 2nd century. Says Mosheim, the Christians of this century celebrated anniversary festivals in commemoration of the death and resurrection of Christ. The day which was observed as the anniversary of Christ's death was called the Paschal Day, or Passover. So notice it's saying that here they observed Passover. Why is that? I think that should be something worthy of note. Like the Jews, Christians celebrated a sacred feast, at which they distributed a paschal lamb in memory of the Holy Supper. The Christians of Asia Minor kept this feast on the 14th day of the first Jewish month, when the Jews celebrated their Passover, and when Jesus is said to have eaten the paschal lamb with his disciples. And that's the 14th day of the first Jewish month. That is the day of the Passover. You can read Leviticus 23. So, 3 days thereafter, a festival was observed in honor of the resurrection. The Western churches, on the other hand, celebrated the resurrection of Christ on the Sunday following the Jewish Passover, and observed the Paschal feast on the night preceding Sunday, thus connecting the commemoration of Christ's death with that of his resurrection. Okay, so we have the controversy. The Eastern churches were keeping Passover on the 14th day of the first Jewish month. The Western churches were observing Passover on the Sunday after Passover in the Jewish month, according to how the Jews kept it. And they would keep the Lord's Supper the night before. Okay, so, continuing on. Toward the conclusion of this, the 2nd century, Victor, Bishop of Rome, endeavored to force the Asiatic Christians, by the pretended authority of his laws and decrees, to follow the rule which was observed by the Western churches in this point. Accordingly, he wrote an imperious letter to the Asiatic prelates, commanding them to imitate the example of the Western Christians with respect to the time of celebrating the festival of Easter. The Asiatics answered this lordly requisition with great spirit and resolution that they would by no means depart in this manner from the custom handed down to them by their ancestors. So this is the 2nd century, and you have the Eastern Christians keeping Passover on the 14th day of the first month, and they would by no means depart from this because that's what was handed to them by their ancestors. So if this is the 2nd century, who do you suppose their ancestors are? from which they learned these things. Okay, so continuing. Upon this, the thunder of excommunication began to roar. Victor, exasperated by this resolute answer of the Asiatic bishops, broke communion with them, pronounced them unworthy of the name of his brethren, and excluded them from all fellowship with the Church of Rome. This, says Bauer, was the first essay of papal usurpation. Okay, so we have here very clearly stated, just the history of what happened here. And actually, I'll just read the last paragraph here as well. For a time, however, Victor's efforts availed little. No regard was paid to his letters, and the Asiatics continued to follow their ancient practice. But by enlisting the support of the imperial power, which the Church for so many centuries controlled to serve her purposes, Rome finally conquered. The Council of Nicaea, out of the complaisance to Constantine the Great, ordered the solemnity of Easter to be kept everywhere on the same day after the custom of Rome. This decree, backed by the authority of so great an emperor, was decisive. None but some scattered schematics now and then appeared that durst oppose the resolution of that famous synod. Okay, and it has footnotes here, which I'll just show you guys in case you would like to reference it. So those 3 footnotes are for what we just read. Okay, now very interesting. We have here in the book published and written by Ellen White this history of Passover and how Passover was kept in the first few centuries of the Christian Church. Notice that the controversy was not about whether or not to keep Passover, but rather the controversy was about when Passover should be observed. So I just wanted to point that out to you all from The Great Controversy by Mrs. E.G. White, and just something to consider. And why is it that this isn't something that is being discussed these days? Just something to ask. Anyways, blessings to you all.